My name is Travis DeHorney, originally from Ravenna, Texas. My father, Jim, and my mother, Dorothy DeHorney. My father's parents was Juanita DeHorney and Will DeHorney. My mother was Viola Gorcha and Ham Gorcha. I was born in Ravenna, Texas on a Barnes farm, which is about 20 miles, 10 to 15 miles from Bonham, Texas. I grew up on my dad was a sharecropper. And a sharecropper was no more than just a person to get a place to live free and do the crops for the owner. My father started me to work at about 6 or 7 years old, driving a Ford tractor plowing down in the bottom of the Barnes farm. We grew up fairly poor, but we grew up happy because we came from a spiritual background. Every morning my mother would get up and fix breakfast for all the kids. We'd have most of the stuff that we had already raised there on the farm. We ate our own bacon that was provided from the place, the hogs that we grew ourselves. We got our fresh eggs from the chickens that we had there. We had our beef and stuff from the cows that we would kill. So we grew up fairly healthy eating. So after I was 7 years old, my dad started me to work in the field. My dad was not able to go to school himself when he was young because he had to stop, and I helped to, I think when he was 3rd or 4th grade, to work and help his father and mother to make ends meet. He could barely read and write. My mother could read a little better than him, but we as the kids didn't have much help as far as trying to study. So when I was old enough to go to school, we went to a school in Ravenna called Salone. It was in the Baptist church, and all grades was in one class, and we had one teacher teaching everyone. The school from where we lived on the Barnes farm was about 1.5 miles, which we walked to school every day. My brother and I would take a piece of fat meat and put on the treble hook because there was a pond in front of the house, and we'd stake our poles in the ground and put them in, and when we get out of school in the evening, we'd have catfish or something on the hooks. We'd take them, clean them, and my mom would cook them for dinner. We always had fresh meals every day, breakfast, dinner, and supper. After a few years of going to school in Ravenna at the church, we were started to bus to Bonham to an all-black school where we had to go on a bus. My uncle was the bus driver, and if you wasn't there when he pulled up, he would leave you. So we would end up having to stay home that day. After going to Bonham School, the teachers knew that our situation, so they gave me quite a bit of help as far as trying to learn. We had kerosene lamps, and at 9 o'clock, 8:30 to 9 o'clock every night, my dad would cut the lamps off because we'd had to preserve kerosene for the next day. We call it coal oil, and we would preserve that until the next day. So if it was moonlight, I would always take my books and go outside and try to read by the moonlight. I tell a lot of friends that today, they don't believe me, but it's true. After elementary school in Bonham, I was always fascinated by athletics, so I wanted to do athletics. But we also had agriculture. It was called NFA, which was New Farmers of America. In the white schools, it was FFA, Future Farmers of America. So by coming off of a farm and ranch, I fell in love with agriculture. So I exceeded very well in that field. In the school, we raised chickens and pigs. So Sears and Roebuck had a program that they would give you a female Duroc pig, and then you would have to get another male Duroc pig to mate that pig. And your obligations to Sears and Roebuck is when you had a litter of pigs, you would give them 2 back. So after I got my Duroc pig from the Sears and Roebuck, I raised it. My first litter was 18 pigs. So I gave 2 of them back to Sears and Roebuck, which was great. And then I started raising my own hogs for my project. I remember, I'm not sure what year it was, but cholera started affecting our animals. And I went to a veterinarian who would come out and charge you for doing that, but he gave me serum. I vaccinated my own hogs and saved all of them. I think I lost 1 out of that bunch. But in the meantime, Mr. Carruthers, which was very influential in my life, started helping me with different things with the agriculture and study to try to help me to prepare myself to be better. My sister quit school in the 9th grade and got married. Both of my brothers also quit school and never graduated from high school, but I continued. So they was having football practice one day, and I went out and asked the coach if I could play, and he let me play. But I was only in the 8th grade. But it would be a fine now, but I was so strong from being in the country, raising hogs, throwing cows and horses, that he let me play with the varsity team in the 8th grade. And that first year that I played in 8th grade, I led it as on the team. We were pretty good. We never did win the championship, but we always got to the championship. As we were speaking about my agriculture days with raising the hogs, and we raised chickens, and Mr. Carruthers was an agriculture teacher, and he was very influential in my life as far as pushing me to be better and to move forward in my life. He also was instrumental in me thinking about even going to college, because no one in my family had ever been to college or either finished high school. Football, so playing my baseball, I played with Joe Morgan, who went on to play with, he was a classmate of mine in elementary and high school, but he finally left and moved to California, where he had a better chance in experimenting in what he loved, which was baseball. And in Bonham, we didn't have a park or any coaches for baseball, but I thought that if I would have continued, I could have probably been with Joe Morgan today. But after finishing high school, Mr. Carruthers, again, was instrumental in taking me to Prairie View, getting me a scholarship to Prairie View. Before then, I became the president of the New Farmers of America in Texas. And after I got to college, I continued to follow that program, and I became the national vice president of the college. But before that, I'd like to back up. When I was in high school, when we raised the chickens, Mr. Sam Rabin, who was the Speaker of the House at the time, heard about the program and asked us for some chickens. So we cleaned and processed the chickens, took to his house, which is in Bonham, and he invited me and 3 of my friends from NFA to sit at his table and eat with him, which I thought at the time it wasn't very popular to sit and eat with a white guy. So after that, he told me if I ever got to come to Washington, D.C., to come to his office and I could sit in his seat. Well, I went on to make the national vice president and got a chance to go to Washington, D.C. Okay. And after I did make the national organization, made the vice president of the national organization, I got that chance to go to Washington, D.C. Sat in front of those. I have pictures of myself and two other friends that was with me at the House and on the steps of the House of Representatives. After that, I came back to Prairie View and I became the president of the YMCA, and which gave me a national audience to travel to Chicago, to the University of Illinois to a conference. After the 4 years at Prairie View, I ran track, played ball, and I became pretty good at what I did, but I really made a lot of mistakes as a young guy would do from a country that had never been to a larger town of Houston, Hempstead. I thought I was, I guess, Romeo, and started messing with the girls, and I ended up getting 3 kids while I was in college, which not a brag part, but it was something that I just ignorance to the fact. But I still have all 3 of the kids, well, 2 of the kids, because one of them passed. And I still love them. I still stay in touch with them. I talk to them every day. After that, I came out of college after 4 years, and I thought I was going to get a good job. I went to work for Lewis and Storage moving company. And one day I got a letter in the mail saying to come for downtown Dallas. And I went to the recruiting office and I was inducted into the military. So I didn't even get a chance to go back home. They told me I had to go right away. So I had to get my sister to come and pick up my car downtown. And they flew us that night. No, they bused us to Fort Polk, Louisiana. So I stayed in Fort Polk, Louisiana for 4 weeks. After Fort Polk, Louisiana, I came home for a few days and they sent me to Fort Ord, California, which I was there for advanced training, but I was only there 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I had orders to go to Vietnam, which I thought they were just they were playing, but it was for real. So got to Vietnam and I flew into Saigon, Saigon. And when I got to Saigon, I didn't have a weapon or anything, so my first duty in Saigon in Vietnam was to load dead bodies on the plane. So in the meantime, that kind of messed with my mind. After that, they finally gave me a rifle and put me on a truck to send me to, I think it was Bencat, Lackey, or the Michelin Plantation. And on the way, I was getting on the deuce and a half, and a guy I happened to go to Prairie View with was the second lieutenant and pulled me off of the truck and maybe get in a Jeep with him, which I didn't want to get in there because I didn't think it was any protection. But I got in with him anyway. The truck that I was on got blown up on the way. So there was God taking care of me again. So I went, I spent my time, I did what a soldier have to do in wartime that I still cry about during mornings sometime. I don't really like to talk about it, but it's real. War is real. After I was spending my time there and doing what I had to do as a soldier, I was getting ready to come home. I got hit. So I was in the hospital. I was in the 93rd Evac hospital for 2 months. After that, I was getting ready to leave. They was going to send me to Hawaii. But the guy that was there, they put him on the Jeep in front of me because his brother had left the day before. And he left, and he was sitting in the Jeep, and they dropped a grenade in that Jeep that I should have been in. So that's twice that I was saved again. So finally from there I went to Japan to the hospital, stayed in the hospital in Japan for 3 months. And from Japan they sent me to Hawaii. And I was in Hawaii, I think for 2 to 3 months. and then I was to get out in July. So they sent me from Hawaii to Fort Hood. I'm sorry, sent me to Fort Hood where I ETS. And after my tour of in Fort Hood, I got out, came home, went to the unemployment office, going to draw some unemployment while I was there, and they told me, we can give you a job. So the thing about it was, when you came out of Vietnam, those years you got a job pretty soon. I was in college. I never forget, after I got out, stopped my athletic days, I started drinking with some of my friends, socializing, not knowing that basically I had the genes from my parents and grandparents to become alcohol. I started drinking, we drank cheap wine, me and my buddies, and we got caught one night on the campus under a tree by the library at night by the Dean of Men. And we had a half a gallon of Thunderbird, I believe, back at the time, and eating bologna sandwiches. So I didn't think I had a problem. We just drank. And continued to drink even after college when I came back home, and then I got drafted to the military. Well, when in the military, alcohol was so cheap to get, and I wasn't out of college or any time before I was drafted in the military and went to war. And when you was in war, in the fields, you could buy a case of beer for $3 or any type of liquor you wanted for that. So I drank because I was afraid, because I don't know, I can't say I was a coward because I fought, but I never had to shoot another guy, another man, and stuff like that. All we shot was rabbits and squirrels in Ravenna. But then when you get into war, it's a different story. So I drank to forget for what had gone on. Then after I got out of the military, I was married, and the alcoholism, even though I was working at General Dynamics, I was a functional alcoholic, but it really affected my marriages. So my marriage, I had 2 boys by, ended up in a divorce, and I stayed single for several years. Then I got married again, and we had a daughter together, but the alcoholism had progressively gotten worse. And I would not chasing women or anything, but I would be drinking, and I might stay out to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning till the club's closed, so I just want to stay out and drink. So that affected my second marriage. And in that second marriage, at the end of it, when I knew it was over, is when I checked myself into a recovery center. And I had moved into a friend of mine who played for the Texas Rangers named Dave Nelson, who is now passed. He had a big house in Eagle Mountain Lake, and he let me stay there a while because he had gotten traded to Kansas City. And I stayed in his house, and he had a full bar full of everything. And then I knew this girl who worked at the warehouse, at the Majestic warehouse, so I'd go get all kinds of liquor. So I really, really became very ill as far as alcoholism is concerned. So one day I woke up, and my boss, I worked at Bell Helicopter. My boss and my big boss, we all drank together. And the day when I finally got sick and tired of being sick and tired, I went to my boss and told him I wanted to go get help, and he wanted to know why. And I told him that I was sick, and he said, "Oh, we drank alike." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I need help." So he told the big boss, and big boss said the same thing. So, but they also helped me get into the recovery center. And the nurse that worked at Bell Helicopter had an uncle in Denton that ran a place called Westgate. And she got me called and got me affiliated with them. So I was supposed to go on a Wednesday. And that Wednesday I decided I want to drink again. So I called and told the person that I had an emergency, that I couldn't come. I couldn't come to Saturday. So they said, "Well, we might not have a room on Saturday, but okay." So I drank until Saturday, And I called and they still had a room. So I grabbed me a filter whiskey and a 7-Up. And I think from Eagle Mountain to Denton, where I was going, was about 28 minutes. I got me a filter whiskey and a 7-Up, no ice, poured a half full whiskey, a jelly jar, filled up with 7-Up. And when I drove up in the parking lot at the recovery center, I took the last drink of that filth. I drank the filth in about 30 minutes. I walked in the recovery center, they took my blood pressure. It was 200 and something over 100 and something. I was about to have a stroke. And the nurse asked me, Mr. DeHorney, my God, when's the last time you had a drink? And I looked at my watch and I said 5 minutes ago, because I finished it in the parking lot. And she said, why? I said, because I knew it was going to be my last drink and I wanted to make sure I got it. So she said, okay, so they started giving me shots and stuff to bring my blood pressure down. So I went in and they gave me a room. There's another black guy, was my roommate. And I went to sleep, and about an hour later they woke me up and said we was going to AA. I didn't even know what AA was. You know, I thought it was just a social club. So we went there, and I walked in, and it was nothing but white guys there. One guy with snuff on his lips, with overalls on, grabbed me and hugged me and told me he loved me. And I broke down and started crying because nobody had really told me that. And I guess I was looking for love. And so in the meeting, a guy got up and said his name was George, and by the grace of God, he had been sober 29 years. And I leaned over to the guy next to him and I said, you know what his problem is? He said, what? I said, he needs a drink. So he laughed. We left and went back to the recovery center. I got there and the black guy that was my roommate, he said, son, he said, I'm an old man. He said, I'm never going to stop drinking. My company sends me here to dry out. He said, so, but if you want to stop drinking, he said, you need to turn it over to God and he'll take it. And that night, I talked to God like I'm talking to you. And I said, God, I like drinking. I like how it makes me feel. I like how it makes me forget when I don't pay my bills. I like how it makes me talk to girls. I said, but I can't quit. I said, but I'm willing. And if you take it, I'm willing. I'd done everything, tried. I'd even got on my knees, but I wasn't sincere. Until I got sincere and really wanted, he did. And he does whatever. Prayed again to find me somebody that could understand and write my story. And I got you. It was one Sunday morning, my dad and a guy named Brother Hill, Chester Hill's son, had an old 48 Chevy, I believe, and they would go across the river, right across the river out of Texas. I think it's a little beer joint on the left, just as you go across the river. And they would go there every Sunday morning. They couldn't go in, but they'd bring them beer. They'd go to the window and get beer, and they'd sit out under a tree and drink beer. So my dad would take me with him every Sunday morning. So this Sunday morning, it was a white gentleman walked up to me with his hands closed and said, hey boy, here, let me give you something. And he gave me a green caterpillar. A lot of you won't know what that is, but it was a worm, big old green worm. And I screamed. And when I screamed and cried, my dad had a hook blade knife, and he took and cut that guy from one side to the other and opened him up. And when he did that, the guy was bleeding and laying on the ground. We jumped in Mr. Hill's car and came back across into Texas. And at the time, there wasn't no police over there or anything. So to this day, I don't know what happened to the guy. I don't know if he died or he got over it okay. But my daddy was drinking. He smoked Camel cigarettes. When we got home that day, that Sunday morning, he took a half a pint of whiskey and a pack of Camel cigarettes and put them on top of a dresser drawer. And they sat there, and I didn't know what that meant because he drank every day. So I looked, the cigarettes was gone, and the beer and the alcohol was still there. So that we was riding the bus to school back to Bonham every day. So that Thursday morning, I got on the bus, and when we was on the bus, everybody that goes to church, the kids that was already used to going to church, say, "Travis, you will not believe how your daddy prayed last night." I said, "My daddy praying? My daddy don't go to church." He goes, "Your daddy was at church Wednesday night, and he prayed and tore the house up." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." So from that day, that Sunday, we all had to get up and go to church. And from that time on, we never missed church on Sunday, on Wednesday night, or anything that was going on at the church. And when we'd travel to other churches, my daddy would always make me get up and do the thank you speech or the welcome speech. And I always had to even sing. I had a little group we sang with, me and Jesse Hill, Morgan Brown, and Roy White. I forget the other guy's name. But we all had a little group we called the Southern Soul Stirrers or something like that. And we would sing and stuff. But my dad became the chairman of the deacon board. He never drank again. He died chairman of the deacon board and died a Christian man. And so when I told the lady I wanted to go on vacation, she said, "Well, we have this job opening at General Dynamics, which are aircraft. They build aircraft and jets for war." So I said, "Well, I want to go on vacation." She said, "Well, okay, when you come back, then come back and we'll send you." So I went on vacation, came back, went to work at General Dynamics I was a dispatcher for wing pivots. They were making a wing sweep jet there. This was in 1967. I worked there. I was first. I knew I had gone to school. I knew how to use computers. Even the guy that I was working for didn't know how to use computers. So I would do most of his work for him. And then he would take me to the meetings with him. And I would give the information to the big bosses for him. So finally a job came opening for a supervisor. And there was no black supervisors in dispatching or production control. So I asked my boss if he would put me in for the job. And he tells me that I could do the job, but I was already doing his job. So finally I said, "Well, okay, I won't go to any more meetings with you." So he finally put me in. So I became the first production supervisor at General Dynamics in Fort Worth. So I worked there for 2 more years. And one of the great things, maybe the sad thing about it is that when they gave me the crew, it wasn't very many blacks worked there, but I had 2 black guys working my crew, and then I had 1 white guy to tell me, "I won't work for a nigger." So I called his representatives and told him to tell them what he said. He told them, and they fired him, and he never got to come back. So after that, everything leveled out pretty good. And this was in 1968, 69, because I was supervisor at General Dynamics up until 73. And that's when we had the big layoff, and I got laid off. After I was laid off in 1973 from General Dynamics, I fished for about a month, and then I went and I got hired at Sanger Harris, which is a clothing store, retail store, a part of Foley's now, I believe. So I was there, and I was a salesperson in the children's department. I sold shoes and clothes to kids. And one day I was there, and a lady came in with 2 kids, grandkids, and they were all over the place, running, swinging on rafters and everything. So no one else in the department wanted to deal with the lady and the kids. So I went over and asked if I could help her, and she said yes. So to kind of quieten the kids down, I started showing them the clothes first and asked if they liked them. They said yeah, and I said try them on. So it ended up, to make the long story short, I ended up selling the lady $700 worth of clothes at the time in the 70s for 2 young kids. Not knowing who the lady was, she left, thanked me, and about 3 o'clock that evening, the store manager and the manager from downtown Dallas, Sanger Harris, came in and wanted to talk to me. So I thought that I had messed up, but they asked me if I knew, remember helping a lady with 2 kids, and I said yes. What did I do wrong? And they said you didn't do anything wrong. She said, but the lady think we are wasting your time because of the way you handled it. You should be in the management, so we're promoting you now to be the manager of this department. So that was I was very elated to know that I have helped someone and had impressed someone enough to get me promoted at the time. I worked at Sanger Harris, I believe, from 73 till 74, 75. And that's when the Texas Rangers came to town, and I began to meet them through them coming to shop there. And one day, it was a sunny day, and I just took a lunch break, and I was riding around, and I ran up on Bell Helicopter, and I went into Bell and put an application. And one lady told me they didn't have anything, and the next lady called me back, and they hired me at Bell Helicopter. And I became a manager there in production control again. And I worked there until 1983. In '83, I got laid off again, and the guys wanted to know what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to make the same money I was making here. So they didn't know how, but I went and I had a lawnmower and a weed eater, and I went to work, and I would go cutting yards at 6 in the morning to 2:30, then I'd go watch Sanford and Son. And after that, I went and got me 3 buildings, and I started cleaning the buildings at night. And one day I went to the unemployment office trying to find help and got in the wrong line. And it was a line to work at General Motors, I'm sorry. And I went and took the test for General Motors and passed the test. And then I got hired at General Motors. And when I got hired at General Motors, I went there, not into management, but after 3 months, they found out what my credentials were, and they promoted me into management. And I was management of the trim department, where they put all the trim inside the car. After that, they started me traveling all over the country for General Motors, and they would basically send me where nobody else wanted to go. And I remember it was in January of 1983. I was in Buffalo, New York, snow everywhere, and I had 2 young kids and a wife, and I didn't want to be away from home. So I remembered that my dad, which I forgot to say earlier, had made me go to Barber College when I was in high school. So I remembered I had a barber license. I said, I'm going back. I'm going to take a leave of absence, and I'm going to go find me a barber shop. I'm going to have me a one-man barber shop, because there was no ethnic, or should I say black barber shops in Arlington. So I came back and I told General Motors that I want to go to school and I want to take a leave of absence. They said, okay. So I went and found me a place, opened up, and by me being the first black business, or the black salon in Arlington, the newspaper found out and came and wrote an article on me. And when they wrote the article, they posted it on the newspaper, and General Motors saw it and called me, and I told them I resigned. And that was the end of my General Motors days. And I had planned to just have a one-man barbershop. Before I put the sign up, and before I could even get the place set up, people was walking in. And I started cutting hair in a chair, not even a barber chair. And I would cut from 8 in the morning to 12 or 1 o'clock at night until I got the thing established. And once I got everything set up, people just started walking in with their license. And from that one-man barbershop, that particular shop grew to like 28 people. And at that time, I said, well, this thing is pretty good. So I went to Euless and opened up another barbershop. I had 18 people in it. And then after that got good, I said, well, I'm going to try to switch over. So I opened a all Hispanic women barber salon in Arlington on Abrams. And that went over so well, the guy bought it from me. He kept coming and kept coming. I told him what I wanted for it. And he would leave, he'd come back. So finally, the last time I told him, so don't come back no more. And finally, he came back one day with a paper bag full of cash money. I won't say how much, but I took the bag, took my license off the wall, and left him TVs and everything, and took my tools and left. So from that time, after I took that money, and I went to Irving, and I opened a shop in Irving. I had 35 people. I had 15 barbers, 15 hairdressers, nail techs, and braiders. And it was one of the most happiest moments of my life because I had, not all of it, but I had several of the Dallas Cowboys who was at Valley Ranch at the time. In Arlington, I had all the Texas Rangers, and I had friends with Texas Rangers, and they would bring other teams from other teams that come into town needed haircuts. They would bring them to us. So we were more like a celebrity place. It was like a country club setting because even the Chamber of Commerce in Arlington would come to me for black items. And on Black History Month, like it is now, they came to me for everything. So eventually, I was the first black to be on the executive board of the Chamber of Commerce in Arlington. And yeah, while being in the barber business, I touch a lot of people and see a lot of people. And one day, when the Super Bowl was coming here in 2011, I was cutting a young man's hair that I cut him when he was in college. And he's now a minister. His father was a minister, has a church. He's a minister now himself. So I was cutting his hair one day, he's a young man, and I said, man, the Super Bowl is coming here. I said, you know, people put stuff together and make money when the Super Bowl comes. He said, that's right. I said, why don't you and I said, you're a pretty smart guy. I said, why don't you and I put together a deal and do something for the Super Bowl? He said, okay, what you think? And I said, well, let's see if we can do transportation. So he said, okay. So we went to several meetings that was leading up to the Super Bowl about transportation. But what we were going to do was outsource it. So when we went to the meeting, we found out that we couldn't do that, that you had to have your own buses, your own cars, and all that. So we said, well, okay, we busted on that. But in the meantime, a white gentleman that owns a restaurant. He said, Travis, you know a lot of people. Say, do you know anybody that deals with the Super Bowl? I said, well, yeah, I know a few girls, a girl out of New York. I said, they come here and they deals with the Super Bowl. He said, well, why don't you get with them and see if I can bring some food into there. So I said, okay. So I went to the lady and I said, hey, look, got a friend, got a restaurant, nice restaurant, you looking for food? She said, yeah, we're looking for food. So I took her there. His chef was a black guy. I got his picture. And he had his picture on everything where it looked like it was a black company. So they came in, they loved the food. They said, okay, we'll do it. So they went back, but they had to run a background check. So when they ran a background check, it wasn't a black company. And they had to have, for that particular thing, they had to have a minority company to do it. So they called me and said, well, can't do it. I said, well, look here, let me ask you a question. I said, I have a minority certification. Can I bring his food in? And they said, yes. So that's how I got to do the Super Bowl catering. And the guy did the food, but my name was on the deal. So we did such, it was in the ice and snow, if you remember, 2011, that's Storm Free. So we made it, we fed all the security, all the TV people, and 2 green rooms. And we did such a good job that when the NFL draft came here in 2019, the NFL called me personally and said, hey, we need you to feed some people for the draft. And so I said, okay. So I went back to the same guy, and he couldn't do it because his wife had messed up the company. Well, he couldn't do it. It was too large for him. So in other words, I went and got another guy that I know named Eddie Dean, who can do just about anything. Eddie Dean was a guy that did the barbecue on the White House lawn when George Bush was in office. He does the inauguration for the governor of Texas when they come through. So I went and sat down with Eddie and talked to him and told him what we had to do, if he could do it, and he said yes. So I said, well, what's your price? He told me what his price would be to feed 3,000 people. So when he told me his price, then me and my partner put 30% on top of that. That's the way we got paid. So that's the way the catering business came to pass. So since then, we've done a lot of small businesses. We've done weddings. We've done wedding receptionists. But those were the 2 major deals that we did. And we still have the company. During the COVID thing, it kind of died down a lot. We didn't do a lot. So we haven't done a lot of big stuff since. But we have very good credibility. We do good work, and we use good people to provide our foods. Yeah, with the same company that the Buttons restaurant, I started introducing music to that. So I rented some guys that plays music, and they had a pretty good band, but they was getting $35, $40 a night. And so I got with them and I said, look, if you guys practice and do something, I can get you better money. So they said, okay. I said, now we got to practice twice a week. So what I did is brought them into the barber shop at night, and we practiced in the barber shop. And then we fine-tuned everything, got rid of people that really wasn't good musicians. Got another drummer named Paul. He was very good, still good. Another bass player named Rodney, who's had a stroke. I went to see him the other night. He's not doing too well. But I started with that group, and we started in the restaurant business. And from the restaurant business to downtown Dallas, to some of the biggest hotels, to Fort Worth Club, to Vernon, Texas. I just traveled them all over, and we were getting good money until we were somewhere, and I asked the guy, the people wanted to hear the blues, and the guy didn't want to. Oh man, I don't want to play that. I said, well, you know, paper paying you, you need to play. And so finally I got them to play. They still exist. I'm no longer the manager, but they're still making it. But I did create that. Yeah, I remember when I was a child in Ravenna, and you know, you wasn't allowed to play with the white kids, especially white girls. And I was my daddy's big boss's daughter, and I were playing ball, and she hit me, and I hit her back. And after she went in crying, and the foreman told my dad what I had done, and my dad panicked because he said, son, you would get lynched hitting a white girl. You can't do that. You can't hit a white kid. And I wanted to know why. And I think at that time I knew I had to be different, because I didn't see there was a difference for us. And even after I did that, the little girl still wanted to play with me. And the two of us didn't know what mom and daddy and mama was talking about. So that was one of my first experiences of knowing that the difference between white and black, and there was that prejudices within the human beings. We went to school in Bonham. We could only go to town on Saturdays, and when we went to town on Saturdays, They had the white and colored water fountains. We'd have to go down. J.C. Penney's had a place down in the basement where black could go use the restroom if you had to use the restroom. You couldn't pick up anything in the stores. When we went to the movies on the weekends, we could only go on Saturdays after we got out of the cotton fields, and we had to sit up in the balcony where the guy was shooting the film. So I experienced all of that, and not only after that, after I went to college, I was in Prairie View. We couldn't eat in the restaurants in Hempstead, which is right next to Prairie View. We couldn't go into the white clubs until the African brothers came from Africa on scholarships or grants, and they went to Hempstead to try to eat in a restaurant, and they told them no, but they went back to the government, and that's when we finally could eat in a restaurant in Prairie View. But not only that, here in Dallas, Fort Worth, Grand Prairie, Arlington, it was to the late 60s or early 70s. Well, the early 70s before you could eat in a white restaurant or live in an apartment. When the Texas Rangers came from Washington, D.C., they had Dave Nelson, Lenny Randall, Fergie Jenkins, Jim Bibby, and they all couldn't find housing because they were black until Mary Vandergrift went on TV and made a statement. But then they still didn't live in the finest of restaurant areas. But that was the first breakthrough in '75 that I noticed. But I know when I was going to Barber College in Fort Worth, and I had a little moped that I would ride back and forth. I was living with my sister and brother-in-law in Grand Prairie, and I'd drive from Fort Worth to Grand Prairie every day. And every day, these guys must got off the same time I did. They would try to run me off the highway. I was on a little moped motorcycle until my sister finally went down to the police department and told the police, and they sat and watched them, and that finally stopped. Then when I finally opened the first black salon and barbershop, unisex, in Arlington, they didn't want me there because I was the first black business. They knocked windows out of my barbershop. They knocked 5 heat-treated windows out. And I kept getting them put back in because I had insurance, and my insurance person asked me not to keep filing. But I did anyway. So that was some of the things that I did. When I came out of Vietnam in 1965, 67, I couldn't eat in a white restaurant. I walk in and they said, "We don't serve niggas here." But I continued to try to go in, but they continued to refuse me. But I still thought that this could be a better life, a better way, and I continued to do and try to strive to do better and make life better for other people, other men.